Hello and welcome. This is the first in a series of 3 webinars showcasing projects funded through the Community Rail Development Fund. So here's the programme for today and also for the next couple of weeks. If you haven't already, please do sign up for these other webinars and also let your colleagues know about them. Anyone is welcome, both within and outside of Community Rail, and you can register via the training and the development section of our website. The format of the webinar is that we'll hear from each of the 4 speakers in turn for around 10 minutes each. Then we will take questions together at the end. You're also welcome to post questions in the chat as we go, and we'll go through these at the end as well. The recording of the webinar and others in the series will be available through the Community Rail Network website and our YouTube channel. You'll find links to these in the members section under the past events material. There are also links to the Integrated Sustainable Transport Fund Showcase series that we ran last year. So now I'll hand over to our first guest speaker, Alayne McDonald from Oxfordshire CRP, to talk about the Moving Murals marketing campaign. Alayne, over to you.
Brilliant, thank you very much. I'll just share my slides. Hopefully this works okay. If you could let me know when.
All good, perfect.
Fantastic. Thank you. Great. So yes, hello everyone. Good afternoon, and thank you very much for having me along today to talk about the Moving Murals project, which is a project that was made possible with funding from the CRDF fund and also match funding from Chiltern Railways, a train operating company local to us in Oxfordshire, to really maximise the impact of this project. Moving Murals is a community art exhibition project that was delivered in 2024-25 in Oxfordshire, and I just want to share a bit about that process, our approach, and some lessons learnt along the way, highlighting what's possible with a bit of support from CRDF. So some background to the project. As I say, this was a community art exhibition working with young people and faith-based groups from underrepresented backgrounds in Oxford and Banbury. And really our aim with this project was to amplify diverse voices, empower young people, and enhance the station environment at Oxford Parkway Station. And this, of course, is underpinned by a great deal of research that I think everyone in the room today will be familiar with around the potential for community artwork to really enhance station environments. Much of this research, of course, done by CRN, led by CRN, demonstrating the real potential for community artwork to improve sense of safety, reduce vandalism, and ultimately improve the experience for everyone travelling to and through Oxford Parkway Station. And in the process, of course, a huge aim for us with Moving Murals was to further strengthen our community relationships with key partners through co-production principles, keeping them involved in ongoing CRP project delivery, hopefully for years to come, and with the impact of a dedicated marketing and comms campaign as well to kind of amplify the role of community rail more broadly and really highlight stations as inclusive and welcoming spaces across the network generally. Great. So just to provide a bit of background to the process we undertook with Moving Murals. As I say, the project was underpinned by co-creation approaches, celebrating local voices and diverse perspectives and connecting with local groups. CRDF funding really was critical in supporting that more strategic communications and marketing piece of the final exhibition, and went a really long way in supporting a dedicated marketing campaign and launch, as I say, highlighting and amplifying that role of community rail generally and improving public perceptions of stations as welcoming and inclusive spaces. So just to walk you through the project as a whole, we started in the first phase with partner engagement and workshop planning, where we reached out to our existing community partners that we've supported through other projects like our Getaway project, supporting young people on days out by rail, and invited them to take part in what was for us kind of our first step into, you know, in the arts and culture space. We are a relatively young CRP. We only launched in 2023. So this was our first sort of step into this space and you know, wanting our community partners to trust us to come along on that journey. So that first step of project delivery was really heavily reliant on having built trust with these groups over the last couple of years, and empowering them to take an active role in planning and also publicising the final exhibition, shaping that communications piece as well. And we also commissioned some community artists to get involved at this stage and engaged them with our sort of brand and identity as a CRP. I think a lot of CRPs will know that often when you're working with external partners, whether that be artists or suppliers or contractors, sometimes they're very new to the world of community rail as well. And we really learned that with a marketing and comms piece, it's so important that everyone that's involved with the project really clearly understands your identity as a CRP and can best represent that message. So with support, having brought them on board and really kind of aligned our approach, the community artists then worked with us to facilitate 5 co-production workshops centered around themes of local voice, identity, place, and once the young people had produced in those workshops individual kind of artistic elements, the artists brought these together into 5 bespoke murals that you'll see later on, which were then installed at Oxford Parkway Station on poster boards, and liaising, of course, really closely at this stage with our station managers, contractors and suppliers to make that as smooth as possible. CRDF funding became really, really critical at these last couple of stages of the project delivery, allowing us to really maximise the impact of the project with a dedicated launch event, marketing campaign and press outreach. And this meant that the benefits and outcomes of the project weren't just accessible to, you know, the community groups and young people who took part in a workshop, but also to the wider community, really sharing the values of community rail more widely and promoting local stations as really positive spaces that belong to all of us. In total, we facilitated 5 workshops with 64 young people across 2 different faith-based community groups. And as I say, produced those 5 final sort of murals that were installed at the station. Young people kind of developed their skills in lino printing and collage and traditional sign writing, which you see some action shots here on the right of how they were sort of developing those creative skills in real time and sort of taking part in a space for self-expression, but also community expression. A bit of a snapshot here of the 5 final pieces, but of course I do encourage you to get out on the rails yourself and hopefully see them in person. If you find yourself passing through Oxford Parkway, please do have a little look. But you'll see the young people reflected on memorable railway journeys, community leaders that mean a lot to them, local landmarks, and words that they felt best encompassed their community, and bringing that sort of story to the station itself for everyone to enjoy. We facilitated a launch event as well with support from CRN, where we invited community groups who had taken part, the community artists, obviously Chiltern Railways, the train operating company, who also supported this project. And remiss not to highlight Jenny there from CRN in the photo on the left, who joined us on the day. And we also produced an exhibition booklet, which you can see in the middle there, which is available at the station to sort of guide the viewer experience and gives a lot more detail on kind of what themes and stories we explored in the individual workshops. The launch event was a real opportunity for learning for us, I should say. It was promoted through sort of stakeholder invites, social media and press outlets, but a real learning opportunity for us in kind of how do we draw that bigger crowd and that kind of wider engagement from more and more stakeholders and community members. And interested to hear the experiences of other CRPs here today as well on how you've navigated that. We were really pleased, having been able to put some, you know, substantial budget behind a dedicated marketing and comms campaign, to have had some press coverage in Oxford Mail and Rail Business Daily. We're also invited for an interview with BBC Radio Oxford. and, you know, really delighted to have been able to, as I say, share that message of community rail and that sort of thread of stations as places, not just with the people who took part in the workshops, but with the wider community, and actually having people reach out to us off the back of those interviews and those articles, asking for more information on where they can find the exhibition, or, you know, publicising the availability of the booklet at the station itself. So hopefully inspiring some new unique journeys off the back of it as well. But as I say, you know, some real lessons learned. Anyone working in the community sector knows that this is hard work and things do go wrong, and it's about learning to see that as an opportunity, not just a challenge. I'd say, you know, one of the things that stands out for us is trust does take time. We were able to get those workshops off the ground in the space of a couple of months, really, had most of the artwork produced and then on to the community artists to refine. But that was only possible because we had spent 2 years building up those community relationships through other project delivery where they felt they could trust us to, you know, take a bit of a dive into a really new space with us. Of course, with this being installation of something in a station environment, early engagement with industry partners is absolutely key. And with those contractors and suppliers, having that direct and open line of communication. You know, it doesn't always go to plan. The station boards were installed the wrong orientation initially, and thank goodness we had that open line of communication where we could get it all right before the final launch. But it's about leaving yourself space and time to account for that flex and adapt to those revisions and those sort of hiccups. And yeah, as I say, you know, I spoke about it a bit earlier on around launch event. We have really learned, not just in the scope of this project, but other projects as well, that direct engagement is absolutely key for us. We are a new CRP, we are relatively young, we're putting a lot of effort, and this, you know, funding from CRDF really helped in kind of raising the profile of the CRP and establishing a strong identity and brand for us. But you know, that does mean putting in a lot of work to get that audience and get that engagement and investment in your launch events. And I've sort of learned that, okay, perhaps stakeholder email invites and social media promotion is one way to go about it, but actually having that personal engagement and extending those personal invitations, whether it's with local authority partners or other community groups, goes a really long way in getting your message out there and drawing a crowd that feel really invested and feel they really own that project in that space too. And of course, working with external partners, community artists, and, you know, especially in the case of this project, working with press and media outlets, it's really key for us that we have clear representation going into those radio interviews or taking a lot of time to prepare those press releases really carefully to make sure that we're communicating our brand and our message really clearly as a CRP. Especially at this point in history, you know, it's being prepared for perhaps some of those questions you might get caught out on. A lot of people interviewing you on the radio may not be so familiar with the world of community rail, and it's knowing how you will approach some potentially challenging questions that come up around the rail industry at large or the political context. So having support from our marketing and comms lead and having this budget behind us to support us to really put a lot of time and thought behind those conversations helped us to really present a strong image and a really positive message around community rail when working with external press and media. Thanks very much for having me anyway. I'm mindful of time and really interested to hear ideas from other CRPs. And if you're thinking of delivering a similar project, please do reach out. Happy to answer any questions and brainstorm together. Thank you.
Thank you, Alayne. That's a fantastic project and brilliant insights as well. So I'm sure there'll be some questions from the room later on. So thank you very much for that. Much appreciated.
Thank you.
We'll move on, if okay, to Caroline Holden from Community Rail Lancashire to talk about the project there.
Can everybody see that?
That's all good, Caroline. Yeah, we're fully working.
Okay, well, thank you for inviting me to speak today, and I'm going to share you a bit of a synopsis on our project called Church and Oswaldtwistle and to Accrington Station and beyond by train, foot and bicycle. I know that's quite a bit of a mouthful and I hope you don't mind, but I've scripted because anybody who knows me, I can often say far too much. So that's what I'm doing today. So why this project? Well, the purpose of this project was to raise the profile of the accesses that we have directly from both station platforms. They really weren't obvious at all, and it seemed a great way to promote access to this walking and cycling route to rail passengers, and from stations in Lancashire, which maybe people might not think, oh, I need to start a walk from there or a bike ride. So widening it up. The Greenway also is part of a wider network too, including the National Cycle Route 6, and it links to the Leeds-Liverpool Canal, as well as some lovely green local spaces too. We built the project around this purpose, and knowing that we were going to be working with a large primary school, that's with 2 Year 5 classes, we worked up the budget knowing that we would duplicate the activities for each of the class groups. The project cost £6,000 with funding provided from a local windfall fund and Community Rail Development Fund. And I would just say, what would we do without the community rail network being able to facilitate us instigating projects and finding match funding? In addition, through the links with the Friends of the Station, who are also the Rotary Club, we were able to involve one of the primary schools that they work with through the International Rota Kids programme. So that was a great route in. We aimed for the 60 Year 5 pupils to make a positive difference to their local station, and importantly, to see how they could personally be involved in improving their area. We also aimed to raise their awareness of the natural environment on the Greenway, and to have an opportunity for them to gain new art skills, working with a professional artist. And also, of course, to be more comfortable and safe with their families using the Greenway for walking and cycling, as well as using the train, of course. How did we do it? Well, we walked the pupils from school to Church and Oswaldtwistle station, and then they used the platform access directly to go just over a mile to Accrington station. They were accompanied by Sonia, the outdoor learning officer from our local environmental charity, along with the local artist Gosha, and they both provided activities for the pupils to be inspired as they did their walk. The pupils also had rail safety training by Dave from our education team, who also shared the wider green credentials of the station at our Eco Hub. It works an absolute dream doing all those green connections with sustainable travel. The pupils travelled by train a number of times, having rail safety awareness, and they even got the chance to do announcements with Danny at Preston Station, when they also visited Lancashire County Council's council chambers to learn about local democratic processes. Now, I hasten to add, there was a reason to do that trip, and I'll just explain it in a moment, but to assure you, it was very child-friendly. What did we achieve? Well, 4 pieces of bespoke artwork that flags the access to the Greenway off both platform stations now. The double royal poster at both stations, which explains the projects and highlights the school's involvement. We've got celebratory badges featuring examples of all the pupils' artwork, and these were given out as a thank you to the pupils at the celebration event. A web page created and accessible via a QR code, which is on the die bond, where all the activities the pupils took part in during the project are also available. And that also includes a really special children's Greenway activity sheet. And that was created from the pupils' suggestions on what they like to do on a walk to help encourage others to have a go on the route too. The schools also receive banners of the station artwork to display their pupils' achievements and really also to highlight access to their families too of the Greenway who were not necessarily using this local facility. Success. I guess the main point is partnering with local organisations, I feel, is a really great way to make quick links with local schools and other community groups, especially close-knit communities like this one. It somehow gives you immediate legitimacy. It raised interest in the Greenway and in improving it locally, certainly, and there are now regular litter picks by different groups as a result. We now have a useful badge maker, of course, which we can use for other projects, so that's helpful. And through the promotion of this project, we were also able to apply for a local green travel fund. And this has allowed us to do another artwork project at the station featuring the Greenway called Through the Seasons and with another Rota Kids school in the area too. And that artwork is actually being installed and celebrated next week. That actually brought an unexpected challenge as we had 2 councils involved in the artwork celebrations, and it was time consuming just to make sure that we got the right protocols to adhere to for both the local mayor and the council's chairman at the celebration. But of course, it all went okay. I'm still working on a date for arranging a family cycle ride for the school with the local bike project. However, I kind of like it when you can have added extras after the life of a project. It helps to maintain our relationships with the school, and the school is now regularly involved in rail safety sessions with our education team. Advice? Well, I won't go through the whole list, but I would say be open to unexpected opportunities that come your way and take advantage of them where you can, though I appreciate they can be very time consuming. But that particularly seemed to happen on this project. We got a free support from our local environmental charity at every session, and that was about 6 days of Sonia's time at least. And now she's also helped with the extra Greenway project that we got funding for too. And through a colleague, as I started to work up this project, we were invited to consider applying for the Speakers Arts Fund at the House of Commons. And as a result of this, the pupils of St Andrews were able to take part in a pre-project where they shaped the artwork project that I've described to you today. And I really liked us being able to facilitate this added extra. And it certainly allowed the pupils to really think about what makes them walk and cycle, which we could incorporate into the project along with taking the train. It is also, that's why we visited the council chamber, as the funding required us to embed democracy into it. It forced us to think out of the box on how to do this. And I certainly wouldn't have thought of taking a Year 5 group to the council offices if we hadn't had a look at this funding. But I have to say, it was really well worth it. Finally, I mean, Community Rail is fantastic at celebrating success, isn't it? So, yeah, don't forget to do that. But I think in the way that suits the people involved, you may do lots of celebrations, but never 2 are the same, are they? And just remember to include some money in your funding bids to cover the celebration, just in case it's needed. On this instance, it wasn't for me, but there have been other times when it has been. So here are some links where you can find out more about our project. I've also added in the link to the Speakers Arts Fund. It's just a small fund, but I've put that in as well now. And of course, like Alayne, you're very, very welcome to get in touch with me anytime. And I've left you with a quote from Sally Hope, who's our link with the Church and Oswaldtwistle Rotary Club Rota Kids. I do have a final slide that I put together, which just outlines what funding we got and roughly how we used it. But you can see that in a bit more detail when you get the presentations, I guess. So that's all from me.
Thank you very much, Caroline. And that's a great description of the project. And yeah, really interesting hearing about sort of the opportunities and the pitfalls of partnership working and all the thought that has to go into that. So thank you very much. And again, I'm sure there'll be some questions following the remaining presentations. So over now to Richard Burningham from Devon and Cornwall Rail Partnership.
Hey, thanks, Gary. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm going to take you down to Looe in southeast Cornwall now, and Gary's going to work the slides for me. But before we get to these slides, I'm just going to give you a bit of background. The branch line to Looe is 8.5 miles long, off the main line at Liskeard. Looe itself is a seaside resort and a fishing port. Population of about 5,000. Gets very busy in the summer. The road links into Looe are not great. The car parks get filled up very quickly, and that's the particular reason why the Looe branch thankfully survived the big cuts in the 1960s, because it was threatened and it was reprieved 2 weeks before it was going to close in 1966. Very busy in the summer, not so busy during the winter, because its main purpose is particularly to take holidaymakers and day trippers into Looe to visit the town, spend money in shops, restaurants, and pubs and businesses. In terms of the traffic, the line sees about 110,000 journeys a year, and half of them are on the line. There's a big car park at Liskeard. It's not an expensive car park, so a lot of people drive to Liskeard, park their car and take the train. It saves trying to find yourself a parking space in Looe, and that's if you can get into Looe. So you've got 50% of the entire journeys are on the line. So it's either Liskeard to Looe or Looe to Liskeard. There's not very much in terms of population between the two, because the line goes along the valley bottom and the villages are at the valley at the top. And even then, they're not big villages. So it's really very much the priority is Liskeard, Looe, and vice versa. So you've got your 50% of just on the line. 25% of the total is to and from Plymouth. Looe is a popular seaside resort in Plymouth. It's a classic day trip, Plymouth to Looe, and obviously that's perfect for the railway. Saltash is a secondary one, so you've got 25%, which is basically everywhere else, and that would include Saltash. What happened, and this is a bit of a law of unintended consequences, was back in 2019, there was a big train service improvement in Cornwall. Cornwall Council led a project which they organised the funding, or most of the funding for, which saw a lot of extra signals put in on the Cornish Main Line, and meant that the Cornish Main Line, Plymouth to Penzance, could go to 2 trains an hour, which is fabulous. On top of that, they thought, right, okay, let's get an hourly service in on the Looe line, and it would need to be a clock face service, like the same minutes past each hour. Now, that's generally a good thing, but the journey times on the Looe line meant that it was obviously a very fixed pattern, but because the main line isn't clock face, it wrecked a lot of the connections. So it meant Plymouth to Looe quite often, and that's an hour journey, quite often people were having to wait 25 minutes in both directions at Liskeard. And now it's obviously not great at all, and it was putting people off. Another side of it was that there is some traffic for the intermediate stations, and that's based a lot around holiday accommodation. There's a hotel at the station just before Looe, and to try and shoehorn in this clock face service in one direction, they always had to run non-stop. Well, it did mean that some trains which would be conveniently timed for guests at the holiday accommodation didn't stop. So we had the feedback from people about the connections. We had the feedback from particularly the hotelier near Sandplace Station about this train just after breakfast doesn't call. What can we do about this? So we went to Great Western and discussed the issue with them, and they got their timetable planners onto it. And the thing about it was that we had to get them or persuade them to reduce the train service from 15 trains a day on the line down to 13. Obviously, that could be quite a controversial message, because it's about cuts to the Looe line. So I promised as part of that, we would front up all publicity if they wanted us to, and certainly if there was any adverse publicity come back, we would go in and say, look, this is why the railway have done this, and it's a good thing, it's not a bad thing. So that was all great, and that all went through. And so the timetable was introduced with the timetable which has just started. So this is a project that's very much underway right now, and I'll have to come back at some other time and talk to you about the results. We bid to the CRDF for some funding to help with quite a big marketing campaign to really get the message out in Plymouth, in holiday accommodation, for people who would be possibly driving down to Liscar to get the train, particularly people also in Saltash, but also to try and get more Looe people themselves on the train. So it's quite a big programme. It's an £8,500 package, which covers all the bases, as I'll go through in just a second here with these slides. And we got half of it from the CRDF, so we're very, very grateful for that. And as Caroline just said, what would we do without the Community Rail Network, and particularly the CRDF, because it makes so many things possible that otherwise wouldn't be. The other half of the money came from another great pot, which is Cross Country Trains Community Engagement Fund. So any of you who are funded by Cross Country and can bid to that fund, that's always worth a look. So we kick off. First off, we do a lot on social media. Great Scenic Railways is our Facebook account. We also have TikTok and Instagram. We've got about 80,000 followers on social media, and it's a really good way of doing actually cost-effective advertising. It doesn't cost a lot to do, and to target it well as well. So here's two of the adverts that we did. First off, you'll see this video right at the end. This is our colleague Mike Parker-Bray, our marketing and communications officer, fronting up this video, and then we did a different video a week or so later, and you'll see the likes that we got and the reach that we got for this. That first video with the 85,000 reach, we spent £100 on Facebook for that, so that was very good. And overall on the three, we spent £220 to get that sort of feedback. Next slide, please, Gary. We also liaised with destination marketing organisation Visit Cornwall, provided them with a video montage, and they agreed to put this on their own. This is the Instagram account, and as you see, there's 138,000 followers they've got, and so that got 776 likes. So that was a great spin-off too. And we've also done a collaboration post with Visit Looe and a Welcome to Looe and Polperro website, where they have shared not just shared it, they've shared it. The collaboration post means that you can share it as if it's your own post. So our post went out under their banner for both of those, and those both went very well. Next one, please, Gary.
Sorry, Richard, it's playing up a little.
Yeah, no worries. Obviously, we did blog posts as well so people can go on from the social media adverts to find out more information. But it wasn't just about social media. Social media can reach a lot of the population. Obviously, that's growing all the time, but we wanted to cover as many bases as possible. So we also did leaflets. There's the leaflet that's aimed at visitors, and also one which is actually going out next week, delivered by the Royal Mail to households in Looe. If anybody would like to see a PDF of these leaflets, then just drop me a line afterwards, and I very happily forward them across. There's 80,000 of the visitors leaflets that's gone out through tourism racks in pubs, in supermarkets. You've seen them all over the place. Some are in stations as well, actually, away from the railway to catch people there. And then in Looe, it's 6,500 leaflets going out next week to households in the Looe area. Very targeted information. Next one, please, Gary. We've done local press ads. So we've got press ads both in the local paper in South East Cornwall, aimed at Liskeard and Saltash and Looe, but also in Plymouth as well, because Plymouth is such a huge market for this. And people who've done the trip since 2019 and have endured these 25-minute waits, this is all about saying, actually, this has come down by 20 minutes. There's many trips now are 1 hour and 5 minutes, and particularly the day trip trains are 1 hour 5 minutes. So you're saving 20 minutes on what's a journey that should take about 1 hour and 5 and now does. Next one, please, Gary. Obviously, we liaise with the local press as well. We didn't get the feared, touch wood, we didn't get the feared Looe trains axed headlines or feedback. And we've also just gone through the local election campaign as well. I was very careful to make sure that the Cornwall councillors for Looe knew what was happening, just so that somebody did come in and say, oh, you're cutting back the trains on the Looe line. There was an instant message and an instant reply, but we didn't actually get that. It was very much about, as you see this headline here from the Cornish Times Online, timetable changes will benefit users of the Looe Valley line, which is great. You couldn't ask for better than that. And next one, please, Gary.
Good news! If you fancy a scenic train trip from Plymouth to sunny Looe, many journeys are now quicker. The timetable now has snappier connections at Liskeard, meaning less time at the station and more time at the beach. You can now get here in as little as 1 hour 5 minutes, which is up to 20 minutes quicker than before. And when it's time to head back to Plymouth, many journeys home are now quicker too. To look up train times, just head to gwr.com. Cheers!
And there we are. That was made in-house. So that was Mike Parker-Bray who was fronting it up, and it was made on a mobile phone by our colleague Betsy Saunders, our social media and content officer. And that was the video that was in the first Facebook post I showed in the first slide. So there we are. So no results yet. Lessons, it's the classic lesson of community rail. If you're on the right lines, 9/10 of the law is polite persistence, keeping at it. Very politely, and of course it's their railway, it's not ours. So in terms of timetable planning and the rest, they're the professionals, and you have to persuade them to pick up the issue and run with it. And that's what happened. Great Western came up with a really good timetable. And part of that was me saying, on behalf of the partnership, look, if there is any adverse feedback, we're not going to leave it just to you as the railway, or you've cut these train services. We're going to get in there as well and explain why we've asked you to do this on behalf of the community and the benefits of doing that. So there we go. But I'm very happy to come back to a future one after we've got to the end of this season and let you know how it's gone. And that's me.
Brilliant. Thank you, Richard. And I should say that I'm planning to take my family down in a couple of weekends' time, so I shall let you know how the new connection goes. And
Right.
that could hope the feedback be useful. Brilliant. Thanks very much indeed. And again, I'm sure there'll be some questions at the end. But in the meantime, pass over to our last speaker for today, which is Andy Pope from South East Communities Rail Partnership.
Hi all. Hopefully you can see that.
All good.
All good. So, having been a line officer for a couple of years now, I started the job, I don't know, 25, 26 months ago. And the first task that was given to me was not a nice, simple one. It was a case of, Andy, we need to finish this development at Battle Station. And the very austere, haunted, Gothic listed building pictured there is deliberately grey and miserable because that's what it looks like a lot of the time before we got involved. So that was the task ahead of me in the first few months. There'd been discussions going on previously, but obviously that they were still ongoing. Again, another dull and grey slide to show what it looked like before. This was very much a beautiful building, but with a very boring past. It was a training centre for South Eastern Railways. It had strip lights, it had whiteboards, flip charts, the pokiest kitchen you ever did see. You literally had to walk into it sideways there, the picture on the right-hand side. Rotten floorboards, black mould on virtually every ceiling corner in the building. And the centrepiece there was, believe it or not, backed onto a chimney stack, which was 3 stories high and was full of bees. And that was actually honey dripping through. the ceiling of the station there. So that was the first task that we had to undertake. Quite an interesting challenge. A bit more colourful from now on in. So what we had to do is really to identify somebody who was going to take this building on. It's all very well spending money on it, and there'd been lots of money spent on it in the past, just keeping it watertight. But no one had really taken it on. But we were approached fairly early on by Battle Town Council. They'd been talking about a community outreach centre for quite some time. And they would be interested in taking on the building if we could get it developed. So that was the spark that started the conversation. We then had a chance meeting with the director of the facilities team at the local railways company, and it just so happened to be on his personal hit list. He had a top 10 of station buildings that he wanted to develop himself. And it seemed like the stars were beginning to align quite nicely, that maybe we could get some movement on this. And he basically said to us that if we could go ahead and find some funding and some partners to make this happen, he'd back us all the way. And that was really key to making this happen. So we went off in search of various pots of gold. The green light came when Peter actually came down and said that the whole building there, at the right-hand side of it, is the ticket office and the waiting room. So very, very Gothic church style. And the left-hand side of it is the empty building. The whole roof had been replaced by Network Rail some years earlier to the cost of about £700,000, a significant cost because it was a listed building. But the building underneath remained empty and redundant following that. And that was the spark really that got SER interested in actually getting things moving. So we managed to pull together a fund, the full 25,000 from CRN, match funding from the Heritage Railway Trust. SER themselves managed to raid the bottom drawer towards the end of the year and find some money, and also engage with Network Rail. So there was a real cocktail of funding. It amounted to roughly £140,000, I think, to complete the actual development. We initially went out, excuse me, to find some local building companies to give us some quotes, but it soon became really apparent that wasn't a route that was really going to work because of railway protocols, permits, access to platforms and station facilities and electrics and all of that kind of stuff. That's when Peter Stapleton came back to us and said, actually, I've got a friendly contractor, a railway permitted contractor who would like to take this on as one of their trophy projects. So we were really lucky, and yet another star fell into line. So they came on board fairly quickly, and we got the green light to move ahead. That's a quick summary of the funding. So a cocktail of the funding, roughly £140,000 between us. And I know this is going on YouTube, but there was a little bit of creative accounting to make sure that there was some passenger benefit, and that's how we managed to get Network Rail on board. So we improved the access to the toilets and actually rebuilt the toilets, and those now are the halfway through construction there, but they are now the poshest toilets that Battletown has to offer. And obviously there, you can spend some time in there if you really wish to. So the movement and the project moved on quite nicely from that point on. The actual finished project itself is a much more user-friendly building. All the floors have been refurbished. Some of the planks were sanded down and replaced where the rottenness had come in. The ceiling gap there on the right-hand side is where the bees were and where the rotten ceilings were in the corner. Just to give you an idea of some of the costs when you're dealing with a listed building, the arched windows there, the set of 3 windows, to have them replaced would have been £4,000 each window. So that would have been £12,000 to have a listed company come in. So they opted for refurbishment, which again was quite expensive, but certainly cut the cost back. Peter Stapleton, again, our friendly director at South Eastern, raided the compound at South Eastern and managed to find some reclaimed old Victorian fireplaces and had those reinstated from the stock that he was holding up there at their central warehouse. So the building now is far more user-friendly. It's much shinier and much more inviting, and lots of people are interested in taking up day projects and using the space. We launched it with a very big grand opening. We managed to attract Lord Hendy, who was actually the chairman of Network Rail at the time, who's now obviously the Transport Minister, and Hugh Merriman there, who was the Railways Minister at the time. The two local mayors came along, and we thought it was really important to get the press and everybody that might be interested in using it along to the party. So we had an opening party with cakes and drinks, and people were invited to come and view the project. And of course, it was important to involve the staff and the developer and their workforces too. And that really took place. Unfortunately, there was a bombshell coming, which I'll go into in a minute. But it was a great day, and everyone was really pleased with the outcome of how the building had turned out. We learned quite a lot of lessons along the way, and I'm happy to share these with anybody who wants to. Really, the key to making this project work was a high-level project sponsor, and having a director-level sponsor at the railway company really opened the doors. And once we got his signature and his enthusiasm behind the project, it moved forward really quickly. The bombshell was that at the opening speeches on the day of the cutting the ribbon, the mayor of Battle Town Council announced that actually they were going to pull out of taking the building, which came as a bit of a shock. And the reason they were going to pull out, and this is a really valuable lesson for anyone who's looking to develop a building on one of our sites, was due to business rates. Certain people that adopt buildings would have to pay business rates. CICs, just for details, CICs, their first building is virtually business rate free. So they actually get an 80% waiver completely of total business rates, and a 20% discretionary waiver. So if they go and plead to their local council, they get their whole business rates waived. Now, in this case, it would have been around £12,000 to £15,000 a year, the business rates and the utility costs. And when the council found that out, which I thought was a bit ironic, when the council found that out, they would have to pay business rates, they pulled out, which was a bit of a shock. So we've now found a new end user, which is a local CIC. It's an arts-related education charity. They're going to come in. They do storytelling through art and puppetry. So if you go to some of the big carnivals around the southeast of England, they have giant puppets that march along the streets. And I don't know how they're going to build them, but they're going to use the space at Battle Station. I was in there the other week, and there were some giant red and white spotted mushrooms, which are now chairs. So the outside of the building is going to look completely different, I'm sure, once they take occupancy, which is still going through at the moment. The cocktail of funding, I mean, clearly the CRDF fund requires some match funding. So the more match funding you can get, the bigger pot you're likely to raise. The funding timelines, that was another thing that I learned. The CRDF funds, and indeed lots of other funds, have expiry dates on when you need to use the money by. And on a long-term project like this, we had a year end that we crossed over when the development work was going on. So we actually had to break it down into different timelines and into different phases, and do different pitches for different funding pots to make sure that we hit the timelines and the money was spent within the right financial periods. That was quite a learn for us, and something that I hadn't anticipated. It was a case of use it or lose it. And I know Gary and Jenny will understand how that works from a CRN point of view. The lease agreements, again, with the new charity that's going in there, there's now a tri-party lease. So the building itself is owned by Network Rail. It's subleased by the railway company locally, and it will be subleased again to the new CIC. So it was a tri-party lease, all three partners coming together to form that lease agreement. That can take up to 7 years to actually produce. So that's still going through at the moment, and will be probably long after I've left this job, to be honest. But we've done a short-term lease to allow the charity access to go in and actually start using the building. So we're hopeful that that's going to happen shortly. So maybe within the next 3 or 4 months, I might be able to show some more colourful photos and some of the artwork that's being produced at the station. That's a quick summary. If anyone's got any questions, please do shout, and I hope that helps.
Brilliant. Thank you, Andy. That's a really interesting project. I'm sure you and your colleagues are really proud of what you've achieved with that, and we look forward to finding out how it goes with the new leaseholder. So yes, we've got, I think, 5 or 6 minutes now for any questions. So if you want to pop anything in the chat or raise your hand, but I'll go over to my colleague Colin to get things started.
Andy, really inspiring, really great story on that big project. I'm just interested, did with such a big project, did the day-to-day activities of the CRP suffer? How did you balance the lots to do and the big workload of the project with the normal day-to-day? Just interested in that sense.
The workload for us really was very much front end. So it was all about planning and engaging with the partners. So as soon as we managed to engage with the director at the railway company, him and his facility team and indeed their contractor took over the work. Now they actually took over the painting and the demolishing and the refurbishment work. So it was all about the planning of the upfront and getting the ducks in the row as far as the funding was concerned. So the first 6 months was pretty heavy on us. Took me away from a lot of the other projects that we had going on. But following that, it was just a case of wandering in there, saying hi, taking in a box of Jaffa cakes every so often and taking some photos and shaking some hands at the end of it. So that's how it worked out. Yeah.
Inspiring. Great stuff.
Thanks, Colin. Any other questions from the floor? There's a comment from Karen there saying, no real question, but a comment to the speakers. What a great range of diverse projects. So much fab work going on up and down the country, linking our communities to the railway. I couldn't agree with you more there, Karen. Jenny.
Yeah, it's really lovely to hear from a few of my people and some people I don't know, Caroline as well. Hi. Really just thank you everyone for those projects. I've been on that Looe line, I've hung around on the station. So Richard's, yeah, absolutely, I understand, you know, it's not the nicest place to hang around and if your waiting room is closed. But the question for Andy, I've also been to that room. I'm really excited to see it transformed. How are you going to evaluate, you know, the value of doing this? Is it worth it, you know, your impact? Are you going to continue to work with the group that are taking it on to understand what the use is? What are you planning to do there?
Yeah, well, the group that are coming in, I've got some really fantastic ideas. And you're right, Jenny, how the hell do we evaluate everything that they're going to do and achieve for the community? But they're talking about putting a coffee vendor in there during peak hours, first thing in the morning. They're talking about having some space for some hot desks for local business people that maybe can't work from home, as well as engaging with the local communities and the schools. Crikey, how are we going to evaluate? It's a good question. I mean, I have now got a license for the Rail Social Value Tool, so I'm going to try and find some matrices that I can feed into the Rail Social Value Tool. But we all know that a lot of our projects, we can't truly extract the amount of value that the community get out of them generally. But I'd like to at least start with the 140,000 investment and see what big number I can pull out of that, I think.
Thank you. Yeah, so it wasn't meant to be a trick question. It is really exactly that point that it's really tough. But I wondered what you were thinking, because I know you think about these things. Thanks.
Thanks, Jenny. Richard.
Yeah, just wanted to come in on that. I mean, I think one of the key things is that you've made an aspiration of one of the senior directors at Southeastern happen, and it's been you who's made it happen. And the value of that is incalculable, because he thinks you lot are good eggs, and you've come up with all this money which he couldn't have found himself to make a great project like that happen. So it's all good stuff. I mean, how you put any sort of value on that, God knows, but it will have a great value to the CRP. Absolutely.
Yeah, well, I can't claim that at all, really. It was, like I said, the stars aligned. We had a really positive sponsor, and the different value pots were available, and it was being aware of that. So at the time, you know, he was talking to CRN about what we could use, and then Peter said, "Have you spoken to Network Rail and their heritage pot?" And it just lined up, and before we knew it, it had enough. And we had a contractor who was happy to do a cost based on the money we'd raised rather than a cost on what it was going to cost him, I think, which was interesting as well.
Right.
Brilliant. Thanks for that, Richard. And thank you again, Andy. Caroline.
I just wanted to say thanks talking about the Looe and visiting Looe. Visiting Church and Oswaldtwistle and Accrington doesn't quite have the same charisma, perhaps, but we work on, you know, that promotion. So I found that really helpful to kind of think what more we could do in an area where perhaps some people don't think to come. We're not even raining today or at the moment. But no, I found that very helpful. So thank you. Give me something to think about.
Brilliant, and it's definitely worth having a look at the Devon and Cornwall Rail Partnerships sort of YouTube videos as well, because there's an awful lot of like little linking integrated transport and the railways and tourism all together. So do have a look, and I'll post a little link to that in the chat at the end of the meeting. Right, we've just got 1 or 2 minutes left. Is there any burning questions in the room, or should we call things to a close? Okay, I think that's a unanimous. I think we're done for today. So, well, firstly, thank you very much to the guest speakers for your preparation and your time and offering your inspiration, ideas, and experiences.
Thank you, everyone.
To everybody here. I think the lessons learnt will be a great value to people both here today and following up after the meeting when they can watch this recording. Do remember we've got another couple of these coming up next Thursday and the Thursday after, so please do sign up via Eventbrite, which you can get to from the Community Rail website page. And other than that, wishing you all a very enjoyable and successful rest of the day. See you soon.
Great. Thanks, Anne. Bye.
Thank
Bye.
you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.